Hey everyone, and welcome to the State of the Art podcast with me, your host, Ethan Appleby. I'm very excited to bring you along as I dive into conversations with amazing people who are at the intersection of art and technology. Each week, you'll hear a different angle about how tech is bringing radical change in the way all of us interact with art. We have on artists to first-time collectors, as well as CEOs from some of the top digital art companies. We'll also look at the effects social media sites and crowdsourcing platforms are having on the art world, and explore how other creative industries such as music and fashion were democratized using technology. In this episode, I'm excited to welcome the CEO of Twyla, Brian Sharples. Twyla makes it possible for everyone to directly access exclusive artwork from the most talked about artists in the game, and without costing you an arm and a leg. They do this by focusing on high quality limited edition prints of 100. Prior to Twyla, Brian was the CEO of HomeAway, which is one of the first and largest online vacation home rental companies. During his tenure as CEO, he drove online rentals from 5 to 95% of the market before selling to Expedia in 2015 for $3.9 billion. And the good thing is, Brian believes the same online penetration can happen in art, where online sales account for only 3% of the market. So look, between seeing a lot of beautiful homes with empty walls and starting several successful tech companies, I haven't met anyone who understands the potential and knows how to execute better than him. Today, I talked to Brian about how Twyla removes many common pain points about selling art online, how they use technology to create an Apple-esque experience, and how big he thinks this market can be for the category between posters and Picassos. So please, allow me to welcome today's guest, Brian Sharples. Hey, Brian, it's great to have you.
Hey, Ethan, thanks for having me here. It's really great to be here and talk to you today.
All right, well, let's fire off. Let everyone know, what is Twyla and why are you excited about starting it?
Sure, yeah. So Twyla is a company that has been operating to the public for about a year, but took about a year before that to build it. So the company itself is 2 years old. The website's 1 year old. Twyla was started with the goal of trying to create an art brand and an art business that was more tuned into the next generation of art buyers who grew up with instant access to everything, grew up with phones and notebook computers that allow them to research, find transparent pricing, know exactly when something's going to get shipped, return it if they don't like it. We just have a new culture of buyers who demands different. And the founders of Twyla understood the art market pretty well, the high end of the art market. It's a very exclusive market for a lot of people. It's very hard to navigate. Pricing isn't generally transparent. The top artists sell at very, very high prices, which are hard for a lot of people to justify, all but the biggest collectors who really understand that. And even if you wanted to collect it, oftentimes the galleries may or may not give you a piece, depending on who you are and what you plan to do with it. And so it's a bit of a broken model. I think most people would admit. It's one of those funny businesses that even the people who participate, in the traditional art market will say that it's a very inefficient business. And so we created Twyla to try to change that, to help people. Listen, people buy art for three reasons, right? They're going to buy it either for investment, and a number of people do. I will tell you, it's a pretty tricky space to be in. And the majority of people who would step into that market and don't really understand it are probably going to lose money versus make money. People buy art for beauty. They're trying to enhance their spaces. They like to look at it. That's probably the primary reason people buy art. And the third reason people buy art is because of the story behind it. It may be that they can relate to that artist. It may be that they can relate to the piece itself. It may be a geographic connection to that piece or that person. So Twyla, we really didn't get any business to try and tackle the investment side of the world. We wanted to provide a great value, but we really wanted to do 2 and 3 well. We wanted to build a company that could deliver large format, super high quality art that would enhance people's spaces, But behind each one of those pieces, we wanted to make sure that they were highly curated in the sense that there was a story that people understand, that the artists, were relevant and interesting, and the motivation behind the piece was interesting. And so we've, combined, I think, a product and a price range with a level of curation that you don't typically see on the internet. And all the while, we knew that, I think if you asked sort of why I originally invested in Twyla, I've done a number of other internet companies and other marketplaces. And it's pretty interesting when you look across e-commerce and you look at the penetration of e-commerce as a percentage of a particular retail product or particular retail category. And, I think everybody knows with the advent of Amazon and a zillion other businesses that in many, many markets, you now have, 50, 60, 70% penetration. In the vacation rental segment, which was my last company, by the time I left HomeAway, I think penetration of people, searching for vacation rental homes online was like, 95%. So we took a look at the art market, and one of the things that's interesting about the art market, you'll see a lot of sort of debate about the numbers, but call it anywhere between 45 and 100 billion in revenue. And the best data available would say that, a little bit north of 3 billion of that revenue is currently transacted online. So compared to virtually any other category of e-commerce, art is very anemic. But against that backdrop, we also know when we survey the next generation of art buyers that they're incredibly interested in buying online. In fact, they buy everything online, and to some extent, for in the next 10, 20 years, the buyers we're going to see are people who, to some extent, know no other way, right?
Yeah.
And so that looks like an opportunity when you see that small penetration. Now, why is it small, and why is art one of the last categories to go online? It's because it's art. I remember going to a presentation. I think it was a woman who was running post-war and contemporary from Sotheby's, and she was speaking about the online art market. And I stood up and I asked her a question, which was just, trying to get her read on how high can online penetration, ever go. And she said, "Look, Brian, there's only three things that you still really can't experience fully online. One of them is food, one of them is sex, and one of them is art." And so
I love that.
And so in her opinion, it was going to take some time to develop. But we actually believed, based on conversations with a lot of customers, that we could change that. But in order to change that, we would have to provide more value, transparent pricing, very easy ways to test and trial the product, very liberal return policies. And so we built Twyla with all that in mind. In the core, what's unique about Twyla is we don't sell original art. We have no intention to sell original art. We are a pure limited edition business. And the limited edition business offers us some advantages that other art companies don't have. The biggest one is that, so what we do as a company is we go out and we work with artists that we want to have on our platform. We have them create an exclusive work for us, and then we have a license with them to sell a certain amount of those pieces. All of those pieces are printed on demand when ordered by a customer. So if you order a piece from Twyla, that will immediately trigger down to our manufacturing floor. That piece will be created. It'll be shipped to you in a fixed number of days that we tell you in advance, and we guarantee you're going to get it by then. And, again, you have the opportunity to return it if you don't like it. But that economic model is a little bit different than other art companies that are trying to sell originals or ship originals from studios and things like that. Because it's a limited edition, we can sell at a lower price point. So our typical artists, to buy their original work, might be in the high tens of thousands of dollars. But at Twyla, it's, $1,000 or $2,000. And so we're trying to provide that value as well.
A lot of really good stuff there. I was going to say on the sex, food, and art, online, food companies like Instacart or Amazon and the porn industry are huge. So you would think they've at least facilitated those industries a little more than it has in art.
Yeah.
When you think about the market though, and you talked about that, like, I mean, how, I read a quote from one of your investors, David Crane, who said that the global market is bigger than you think. It could be $100 billion, and there's a huge gap between posters and masters.
Yeah.
How do you think about it? How do you talk about it? What's the number in your deck as far as how big this space is?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It is a pretty big business overall if you just look at what's being transacted today. In the segment we play in, I don't think the market has yet been created, and I think it can be orders of magnitude bigger than the traditional art market today. One of the things we've realized with Twyla, we've had quite a struggle in the first year. All companies really kind of struggle in their first year to figure out what is their identity. Are we a fine art company? Are we a decor company? And I think where we've settled at Twyla, and it really has to do with, where we resonate with our customers and what people like about the brand, is that Twyla is sort of straddling the line between being a fine art authority. So, for example, we have, curators from some of the top galleries in the world who work here, but also combining that with interior design authority. So we also have top interior designers who work here, and our philosophy is that we want to combine quality art with great design. In that sense, what we have found at Twyla is that where we are resonating best is in fact with people who are trying to, make their homes beautiful. Interior designers have become a huge part of our business because designers understand the value of the pieces we provide. They may have a contract to decorate someone's house, and they might have been given a $50,000 budget to do that. With certain originals, that budget may allow them to put one piece in the living room. With that same budget, and our average price point is today about $1,400, you're looking at, potentially 40 pieces that can go in that house. And so I think what we're trying to make art so much more accessible and so easy to buy that my feeling is that there's a very, very big decor business out there. There are white walls, put it this way, everywhere that could be populated and beautified with more things. And certainly people think about, when they put together a bedroom or put together a living room or a family room, they're going to be fairly complete and say, I need a sofa, and I need a love seat, and I need a couple lamps, and I need some tables and things like that. People don't, some do, but people generally don't think the same about sort of wall decor and wall art. And so my belief is that if we can really combine that art industry quality with that design eye, deliver it very efficiently to the marketplace, that will open up a much bigger market than the traditional art market. Because now you're looking at, the decor business, which is orders of magnitude larger than just the art market itself, combined with the art market. And I think it could be I think for what we do, it's a multi-billion-dollar market potential.
Yeah. So what's that number? Do you have a number in mind as to how big it can be, or what it is now and how big it will be?
Well, we use, in our investor decks and the like, we use $100 billion global number for the art business. But when we talk about, adding in that decor component, we think of that as, maybe a $20 to $30 billion market in and of itself.
Yeah, they say that something like 5% of people own original art, 20% of people own, wall decor, and that, there's 80% of walls out there are blank.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, like from a psychological perspective, I think it's because the last couple generations have grown up with family photos on their wall, and they actually view their walls very personal, and they want something unique, but they don't know how to go about it. And so if you give them that channel to go about finding something that they really like, they'll get it.
Yeah. But I think you also, in order to do that well, what we've learned is you also have to provide pretty high touch services. So it's not enough to just throw a bunch of pieces, out on the website and talk about the quality and the artists and put up a price and hope people will buy. You also have to hold people's hands. We have We allow our customers to call our curators on the art side. We allow our customers to call our curators on the interior decoration side.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people, you have to handhold through that. I think one of the things I have learned about this isn't, a business that's as rational as buying, blue jeans or something like that. People do have, their own taste and style, but I think what I've learned is that most people who don't spend their lives in the art market are very nervous about taking that last step and buying a piece. I mean, it is a big deal. A Twyla piece costs, $500 and up. And so that's a big investment for a lot of people. And so what you find is it's actually pretty easy to get people to put art in shopping carts. So they come to the site, they get excited, they see 5 or 6 things that they like, and they put them in their cart. To get them to then take that step of going from the cart to now I'm going to pick one of those 5 and buy it is scary for a lot of people. And so we've started providing just touch points all along the way that really encourage them, to call us, talk to people here. We're building technology like a lot of other sites already have that allow people to visualize pieces within their setting. We've been doing most of that manually since the beginning, so people can send us a picture of their rooms. We have really good content people who can then sort of place art in those spaces, and we do it very professionally. But something as we get bigger, we're going to have to do in a more leveraged fashion. But I think that's one of the cool applications right now of technology, the art market.
Yeah, I mean, let's dive into that a bit, because I liked your point about people buy for 3 reasons, right? It's either an investment piece, it's the look of it, or it's the story of it. How do you see, how do you see technology playing a role in that and telling a story? And do you think that what's the benefit that online or tech can have for the story and the aesthetic?
Yeah, well, I mean, just right off the bat, even talking about just sort of the whole process piece of this, I mean, technology has changed massively in the next few years in terms of, the quality of the scanners that you can use to, take an original piece of art and turn it into an edition, the printing quality and the technologies available to do that. And there are, we have pieces that you can see here in our office that
which it's a beautiful office, by the way.
Thank you.
I love walking around.
That are 2-dimensional pieces, and you go to run your finger over them because your mind just can't believe that it isn't a 3-dimensional piece. And so technology has allowed us to deliver a quality and a price point that I think didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago. That's number one. Number two, though, when it comes to the story, I think the story is important. Like, we're finding that, at least for our buyers, they're focused on beauty and design first. But what gets them over the hump is then that validation that there's a real story behind it. And so what the internet does allow you to do, and I think quite a bit better than a typical gallery experience, is to let you drill kind of as deep on the piece, the artist, their background as they want. And so we do invest a lot of time and money in, when we bring a new artist on board, going out to their studio, interviewing them, doing photo shoots, taking film of them in the studio, researching their backgrounds, and making sure as much of that's available online to our customers as possible. And
as part of the Twyla experience that when I went through it, that to me is what stood out. And that's where I do believe, like you said, that online can be a huge difference, where you can almost chat with an artist live, you can see their story, the video that you guys have. I mean, that's why I think Instagram has had a lot of success, is because it has the Insta stories, the videos behind the scenes, and video being one thing that can really make a huge difference that you don't get when you go to a gallery.
And so we are in discussions with artists about that very thing. I mean, we do have the technological ability to, have a button online that says, video chat with an artist. And if artists are willing, we can certainly, route a FaceTime call right down to their studios. There are a couple of our artists that have done that in the past, and they find that the close rate when somebody actually takes that step to go and talk to the artist and just has a quick chat with them or jokes with them is something that gives people a great deal of comfort. So that is something I think we're going to be instituting in the future here, is more of that and encouraging artists to do that. I mean, some artists, are willing and Others are not.
Others are not. Yeah, I always thought like my next company might be one like I don't know if I call it like a YouTube for art, where you take, we get a sense of what you like, and then immediately you show the video. Because sometimes it's like if someone if they have confidence in what we're showing is what they're going to like, and then they see the artist right away, it can get them to convert at a much higher rate.
Yeah.
So you talked about offline. You guys are opening up a gallery here in your office. How do you think about, and we had talked before about, thinking about the retail aspect of this.
Yeah.
How would you, how do you think about the balance between online and offline, and what is that relationship?
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, we have really two somewhat distinct businesses here. One of them is a business to the trade, which is to interior designers, and interior designers are actually a perfect audience for the company, because they're going to take the time to come here to our offices, see the quality of the work, or we've done a number of events in the design community so people could be exposed to the work. And of course, once a designer understands the level of quality, I mean, a designer has an eye that can say, I like a piece, I know what it looks like, I can research this artist, this makes sense, I can, my client will find this relevant. And the only thing that's missing from a pure online experience is that designer going, but what does this really look like in person? What's the frame like? What's the print quality like? And so once a designer has seen that, then they just come to the site and order on behalf of their clients. So you have to go through that sort of one time. The consumer side of the business is no different. What you find, I've worked in a number of, or sat on the boards of a number of e-commerce companies, and there are norms around conversion rate for somebody who comes into an online site interested in your product and comes out the other end actually buying something. And I can tell you that in this business, the online conversion rate is well below most industry standards for other e-commerce categories. And the reason for that is because it is a visual product and people need to see it. There are some very successful models, particularly in Europe, that have been built on the back of a very big retail presence. Loomis is one of them. So Loomis, like Twyla, is a pure limited edition business, much more heavy on photography than it is on the kind of fine art we represent. But Loomis, has 33 galleries in major cities around the world, opening 2 or 3 a year. It's a very big business. I believe, from what I've heard, maybe 20% of their business is online and 80% of it's retail. They have a competitor out of Paris called Yellow Corner that executed very much the same strategy. I don't know how many stores Yellow Corner has, but they probably have 50 or 60 of those stores. Now, so I think retail, this may be the perfect space where you have to combine a bit of retail, with online selling to really maximize, the delivery of your product into the world. When we launched Twyla, we decided that, at least early on for a young company like us, building a big retail network was a very slow and very expensive undertaking. And so one of the things we decided to do was build what we call virtual galleries around the world. And what Twyla has done, we have about 70 showrooms now throughout the U.S., and those showrooms range from, the lobby of a hip hotel to, the inside of a luxury real estate company to, a handful of carefully chosen restaurants and things like that, where we've just said, let's put our pieces out there in the world. Let's put Twyla tags next to them. Let's use that for branding, and let's use that for conversion. What we found was that it does a nice job for us on a branding front. So, if you come to our site and you're in New York and you want to see our quality, we can point you to a place to go see our pieces. What it doesn't do, we found, is when people, let's say, walk into a hip hotel that has a few of our pieces, it doesn't really convert buyers because in that context, there's very little information. There's nobody there to really sell it. They might go and ask the guy at the front desk,
and he has no idea.
And he has really no idea what's happening. And so I do get a bit jealous looking at companies like Loomis, who have a strong retail presence, who have salespeople who are trained to really help consumers on the spot. We have done a number of art fairs. Art fairs have been very successful for us as events. We sell a lot of pieces at art fairs, but more than that, a lot of people just get exposed to the pieces and come back and buy later. So somewhere in this business, there's going to have to be a retail strategy. I still favor a partnership approach that might make sense. There are, as Twyla, if you think of Twyla as a high-end decor business, there are lots of high-end retail decor businesses out there that don't necessarily focus on art. And so maybe there's a partnership in that would ultimately make sense for the business. We want to deliver the whole experience online because we think it's a better experience. But with this kind of product, I think we are going to have to get pretty aggressive about how we expose it out in the world.
Yeah. And I mean, it is, I like the idea of even just like use the word awareness. I mean, brand awareness, awareness of art and something that's beautiful that people are looking for, look at. I mean, that just, it increases at some point the chance that they might be more likely to buy. I think, like you said, how do you convert them on the spot? And it'd be interesting to think through strategies, like we said, like video, like bringing in technology, like beacon technology or something where they stand in front of one and up pops, on their phone and push notification that's like, hey, watch the video about this artist, and like things like that could end up converting them.
But the most innovative thing we did is that, Twyla offers a program that nobody offers, which is you can buy a trial piece from us online for $30. And if in 30 days you return that piece, you'll never get charged anything more than $30. And it was a pretty risky program for us because, if we sell a $2,000 piece, the cost to us to manufacture that piece is very high. It is in the $1,000 plus category. The cost to ship it, is multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the scale of the piece. And so if somebody buys a piece for $30 and they return it, we've eaten a lot of money on that transaction. It only works if your return rate is so low that it's worthwhile. And so one of the things we've been pretty thrilled and surprised about, it was an experiment we launched about, I think 5 months ago, is that in fact the return rate is extremely low. And so, you do that if you feel really strongly about the quality that you're putting out there. And so that's been a very successful program for us. And people get to do that one time. And then if they buy from us again, then, they'll have to pay a full price. And so it's more about seeing the quality than I do think online you do have the ability to really study the piece. You can blow it up, you can look at detail, you can do all those things.
And I love that program. I mean, to me, it's from a business model perspective, it's so innovative, and it does go to show like the confidence that you have in your product. That hey, if someone gets it in there, like they're not going to return it.
And the other thing it allows you to do too is, let's say the return rate was higher than you expect. Well, then you get to study every one of those returns and ask people why it happened. And, it's also really good data because those, if the numbers had started high, I'm sure we could have adjusted them down by learning. But, right out of the gate, it turned out to be a good program for everybody, good for the customers, good for us.
Yeah. When and like we talked about online, offline a bit, and there's a report done by Hillcox, which says, it's kind of like online companies want to go offline, and then offline galleries want to go online. And so I have this vision of some cyborg or an Iron Man, thing where everyone wants to converge. I mean, do you you talked a little bit about your strategy and you think there is a retail strategy. What about just like galleries specifically, and how does that merge? How does that play in the future, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think for original art, it's going to be, I'm not expecting to see major changes in the gallery world other than, it's like any business. When you start seeing penetration from other sources, companies come in like Twyla and others, or Van Gogh, and make it easier for people to buy, it's going to slowly eat away at their businesses, and only the good ones in the end survive. Sure. It's sort of like, Amazon has put tier 3 retailers out of business.
Yeah.
Tier 2 retailers are now, fighting for capital because they're unprofitable. But there's still a whole host of tier one retailers out there who just, they've built big brands, they have great products, and retail is alive and well for the good ones. And so I think that'll be true in the gallery world. But I think that one of the things, if I had to see a trend that I see in other businesses, that the new consumer demands is not only transparency, but also choice. Like people like to see a lot of choice before making a decision. With HomeAway, for example, we found that the more properties we added in a market, the higher the conversion rate would be, because the more choice you give to people, the more likely it is that they're going to find something that they actually like. A physical gallery is limited in its ability to give you choice. It has a certain amount of square feet, a certain amount of wall space. Even the artists get frustrated, because you may be an artist that has 30 amazing pieces, but you're given one wall in a gallery and they put up 2 of those pieces, and that's all people can see in that kind of a setting. I think the retailers of the future, or the businesses of the future, will combine the two, where you'll see, and I think Loomis is a good example of this in Europe, where there are maybe 150 pieces in their store. There are online screens to look at 500 more of those, and they combine this very broad inventory with an actual high touch retail experience. I don't see traditional galleries evolving to that. Some might.
Yeah.
I think there are going to be new companies that come in and just, start from scratch and do this a new way. And we're experimenting with that. We, last year.
What is that new way?
Well, I mean, we've looked at, done some experiments with, bringing in sort of high-end projector technology into a retail setting, where you have physical pieces, but then you can, within a virtual frame on the wall, essentially take somebody through an entire catalog if that's someone to take them through. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
But if you're actually looking at an actual piece on the right and essentially a digital piece on the left, it helps your mind bridge between the two.
Sure.
And so there are going to be lots of innovations like that, for sure. And I think we'll be doing some of it as well.
Yeah. I mean, with what you said, Loomis, though, they've got 30 stores, but I think you said only 20% of their sales is online. One of my concerns would be that any retail presence is, it's a cost, and like a higher operational cost. And so that's why, like, you talked about partnerships earlier, which presumably, like, you don't.
It is a high operational cost. Yeah.
Where you don't have that operational cost. I mean, pop-ups. I wouldn't, like, you guys, I think, did a pop-up at some art fairs or other places. Like, that idea of a pop-up. I mean, you've seen the fashion industry, both from the online, offline, like driving more experiences offline, to also doing more pop-ups. I'm curious how the art world will adapt to that.
I think you're just going to see more and more of it.
Yeah,
for sure. You're going to see much more of it. I mean, there's all kinds of models out there that are doing it today. Like Warby Parker's a great example. Yeah. Tom's a great example.
Casper.
Where they'll come into a city, they'll do a pop-up, they'll create a bunch of awareness, and then oftentimes that market will be so rich for them that they say, we're just going to make this permanent. But a lot of brands now use that form of experimentation to just see, where do they resonate, in what cities. Sometimes businesses work great in San Francisco, but are a complete dud in Boston. Mm-hmm. And so that's another thing we're looking at here pretty heavily. One of the issues we have is our bread and butter are large format, pretty dramatic pieces. Think 4x4 feet by 4 feet as an average for us. So, a pop-up is typically something you do in a small space, mm-hmm. or on a bus or in an Airstream. And, there's a limit to how
Sure.
much inventory we can actually show. So in order for us to do that well, we're going to have to bridge some kind of a digital experience mm-hmm. into that allows people to see more.
Yeah, I'm also, I'm curious, and I give thought to this, where you see galleries, I mean, there's no real rhyme or reason as to the artist that they choose, other than the gallery owner likes them, the curator likes them. How almost using data, and you've seen actually the music industry has done a really good job at this. A company called Bands in Town, small company that basically powers small musicians to understand where their fans are. And so even like reverse engineering that and flipping it and saying, in San Francisco, here's like 5 or 6 artists that are really popular. And they might not be well-known artists. I mean, they might be kind of like emerging artists or of the artists that are in your remit. And basically using data to drive what artists would be shown at pop-ups or at gallery showings. Or
Yeah. No, so listen, that is the benefit of running a high volume, if you will, internet business. And Twyla is still a small company, but it's growing very fast. Is that over time, you start to accumulate data intelligence that you can use to do this a lot better. So, I mean, let's put it this way. In the early, a year ago, when the site hadn't been launched and we had a brand that nobody knows, the way we went out and sourced artists is we had curators, ex-Gagosian people who would go out and convince artists to give our platform a try. And what we were choosing was purely based on what those art curators thought, was the right thing for our customer base. Yeah. It's only now a year later, and our process is very different. We now have, probably 40 to 50 artists a month who sort of apply to be on the site, and we now have a panel that includes art curators, interior designers, and data scientists from our company who are
I love this.
Who are looking at every element of what performs well with our customer base versus not, and it's all and then you take those 3 opinions in conjunction, and we have to check the box that the curators say, this is a real artist, a significant artist, and somebody that something that provides a great value. We have the interior design community saying, this will be, the kind of piece that will beautify somebody's home. And then we have the data scientists saying, based on the size, the color, the style, how that artist has performed in the past, how like artists have performed, the price point, all of that has to hit sort of the data side of it. And so that's a very new thing. We just started doing it. In fact, we just, the artists we're going to bring on next month, we just for the first time went through that sort of data-oriented process.
Now I'm geeking out over here. This is great.
But it was only because we didn't have enough data. A year ago we didn't have any data.
Yeah.
And now, listen, we sold, many hundreds of pieces, and that's some data. When we get into the many thousands of pieces, you'll have even more and go from there.
And I love that. I mean, it's, a company, and people are going to think that they're sponsoring this podcast, but Stitch Fix in the fashion industry has done a great job at that balance. And, they use data to drive what recommendations are, but there's still that stylist, in the art world, that'd be the curator kind of at that last step saying, the data narrows it from 10,000 to 100. Right. And then the curator or the stylist says, okay, of the 100, here's the 5 that I would choose. So there's still that human element and that eye.
I think in this business is important to combine the two.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. So one of the things that I'm excited being in the industry is that you come from the tech space. You have launched several companies. You've grown companies from nothing literally to IPO, which is all congratulations. The tech world operates quite differently than the art world. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about this earlier. How have you been able to merge these two worlds? And you just gave a great example. How are you able to merge it? How's it different? And what's something that perhaps, you've been able to take from your prior experience and, bring to the art world that you think has been valuable?
Yeah. I mean, I think there are similarities between all kinds of businesses. Anybody who's going to sell something online, there are a number of things. You can put together probably 70% of your team with people from other businesses who have done that well, who understand the importance of A/B testing and experimentation, and UX design, and being relentlessly focused on conversion rate and how you improve that on a monthly basis, because anything that's converting well means that it's making your customers happy. And so there's a lot of science behind running an e-commerce company, especially on the marketing front, on the web design front, that makes a ton of sense. But with all these businesses, there's also always sort of a 30% that has to have some level of industry knowledge. Now, I will admit that when I started HomeAway and Twyla, I really didn't have any deep knowledge of the industries whatsoever. And I think as an entrepreneur, you think that sometimes because you feel like you can see the forest from the trees because you don't come from the industry, that's real beneficial. And I think it is, because you come in with a whole different set of questions. You look at everything very critically. You have lots of ideas that maybe people who've just had their blinders on for years would never think of. But you also realize pretty quickly is there is a lot of history in this business. There are a lot of people who have, tried and failed. There are a lot of people who have tried and semi-succeeded to do things like this. And there are people out there that have learned those lessons. And, any startup business like this, or if you're trying to create a new industry, it's a bit of a race to figure it out before the capital runs out, right? It's always striking a balance between the money you've got to work with and the time that affords you and your ability to figure it out. And so, if somebody just sort of jumps into a business like this from the tech world and doesn't spend any time trying to appreciate or have advisors who have seen the art world as it exists, it's just going to take them longer to sort it out. And I do think we're a little bit guilty of that. In our first year, most of the people here didn't come from the art world, and felt that we could just come in and be super disruptive. One of the things that our company did early on, when we launched our first brand campaign looked like a fashion campaign. It was targeted at millennials. It was very edgy. It featured, semi-nude photography with, gorgeous models in it. And it was this idea that we were trying to create some shock value. We were trying to sort of merge fashion and art. And that campaign actually turned out to be kind of a dud for us. It created awareness for the company. But for example, we had artists who were upset about the images and the advertising, and that we had to convince to stay on the platform. We had writers from the art world who said, this is an offensive campaign. You're using fashion to sell art, and you're not respecting the art and the artist. And, we thought that maybe that wouldn't be important, but it turns out it is important, because those art world critics still drive, a lot of positive, negative sentiment about businesses. And so we got back to a place where we decided to really, dig in deep, understand those perspectives, talk to our artists, talk to people in the art world. We're still very committed to building something unfettered and different than what exists today. But there are certain things that we've learned from the art world that we have to respect. And if you want to have great artists on the platform, then you have to make sure that you really highlight what they do and who those people are. And we're now, our second campaign it was a complete 180, where we went out in artist studios and we paired artists with our customers, and we had conversations between them, and we taped those conversations, and then we put out content. It was called an Art Connects Us campaign, and it was all about how art can connect people to another world, to other artists and things like that. And very quickly, all those problems from the beginning resolved themselves, where now all of a sudden artists were calling us because they felt really good about how we were representing their craft. And so it's a balance. I mean, it's a big balance.
Yeah, it must be. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in your board meetings. So you've got former CEO of Christie's on there, the CEO of Starwood, and so you get all the retail, the hotel angle, and everyone's just duking it out for.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That tension is actually
it's great.
It is pretty interesting. So the board. We have a board of 4, and I'm one of them. The other 3, you've got one of the most innovative venture capitalists in the world, the CEO of Google Ventures. So they're tech all the way. You got Doug Woodham, who used to run Christie's, who is absolutely old school, art world. Although I'm going to give Doug a lot of credit here, because Doug joined the board of this company because he sees the problems with the old art world very transparently, but he also keeps us pretty grounded in the things that are important to us. And then you've got Amar Lavani, who used to run W for Starwood, and now runs
one of my favorite hotel chains.
Yeah, and now is CEO of the Standard. And what he's really tuned into is is popular culture and that next generation of buyers and what they care about
Experiences.
and experiences. And Standard is all about Standard is a lifestyle brand. They've created a lifestyle brand, and people go to those hotels because they love the content, they love the programming, they love the newsletters, they love the other people that are there. And so yeah, we have a really interesting board because I think really, if Twyla is going to be, a successful company, it is the combination of those three things that's gonna get it there.
That's great. And you mentioned the CEO of Google Ventures. What is it that you think will? How does the venture space look at this, and how do you get them more interested in the art space? I mean, if it's $100 billion untapped greenfield industry, they should be all over it. But I'm not sure we've seen that yet.
Well, everything comes in waves. I mean, there were, the venture world looks very closely at, what's come before and what's performing in the present tense. And, there was some venture money that was poured into a number of companies, be it, Artsy, Paddle 8, and others. Saatchi. And, those models were a lot slower getting out of the gate. So when all of those guys came along, they were selling the same vision, right? This is a big multi-billion-dollar business, and it's greenfield, and nobody's buying online. And so I think, when you're at the start of something and nobody really has a lot of experience with it, that's a pretty easy time to raise capital because a lot of, venture guys are willing to sort of take that bet, good team, good industry TAM, love the product, it's fun, let's jump in. But after that first wave of investment, what venture capitalists look the hardest at is just how have those companies performed as investments? Did their peers who jumped into those companies, make big returns from those investments or not? And unfortunately, with the online art business, those returns have still been pretty spotty. I mean, the highest valued company in the bunch right now is Artsy, and Artsy has a good valuation, but it's a private valuation raising private capital. It's not a real valuation until the company gets sold or the company gets taken public. And Artsy, while they've done a great job of building a big audience, still hasn't figured out. It's not a profitable business. It hasn't figured out how to monetize it yet. And what I know about venture capitalists is, listen, they're fun. They like to take big risks. They like to build new industries, but in the end, they're actually all about revenue growth and EBITDA. Ultimately, you have to build a business that they believe is going to make money, and there have not yet been a lot of good examples of that in art. So I think we're in a period right now where traditional Silicon Valley VCs are actually pretty cautious about the space, and they're waiting to see something really hit. Now, kudos to Google Ventures and taking a chance with us and writing a pretty big check with Twyla. I think what they saw with Twyla is that Twyla is different than the other 10 companies out there that got funded over the last 5 years. That I think what they appreciate is that focus in a business is generally important. So us coming into a meeting and they say, well, gee, the original market is really huge, when are you going to get into that? And we say, you know what, we just want to do one thing really well: limited editions. We want to keep this business model focused and simple. And when that's a huge success, maybe we'll look at something else. But that focus, I think, is very much appreciated. And so we were able to raise funding based on, I think, a new and a different model. But listen, I'm sure the rest of the venture world is now watching us and what's going to happen, with this company, because venture capitalists are, to some extent, are lemmings. When they see other people going in, they'll follow in behind. And so I would say that, until we see, a big exit or the big announcement that one of the companies that's been funded, is now past break even and making a profit, probably we're not going to see a ton of investment in the category until that happens.
And do you think it'll be in different models like not like yours, but the fact that you are a different model, others that do different models?
I think so. I mean, there are a whole bunch of different models, I'm sure, to be exploited. Everything from retail to the licensing side of the business to, you talk about the poster business earlier. I mean, the poster business is potentially a very, very large business. There are some pretty big companies in that space, and you look at things like hype culture right now, the customized sneaker market that's out there, and you have artists collaborating with brands and then doing drops of a product that sell 40,000 units in one day. Those opportunities are really cool things that also exist in this industry. And so I think there are some models yet to come. And then listen, the other one, and HomeAway wasn't a lot different than this in a sense, is also a consolidation play. This may be a market where a really smart investor looks at it and says, I'm going to build an art company that plays across a number of categories, from originals to posters to limited editions in between, some retail, some pure online, and, they end up running a consolidation play and, stitching together 5 or 6 companies that build something that's big enough that you can take it public and generate return.
And you see Saatchi going that route.
Yeah,
they just launched an art fair, and they launched a limited brand, and they've got the emerging brand.
Yeah, agreed.
So your last company, like you said, you took from what was a greenfield to an IPO in 10 years. You were at an IT company for another 13 years before that. If you're looking out, I mean, what's your 10-year vision? When you IPO Twyla, what's your 10-year vision for Twyla and kind of the space in general, and where art plays a role in our everyday lives?
I think what would be a real success for us would be for Twyla to be a well-known mass market luxury brand in the art world. If I were to ask you right now to, name me 2 luxury brands when you think of cars, when you think of handbags, when you think of watches, when you think of shoes, you can answer that question for every category. But when we ask a consumer and say, what's a luxury brand for buying art? Like, what is it? They have no answer. They're just sort of dumbfounded. There isn't some people might say Sotheby's and Christie's. Well, that's not a luxury brand for art. That is a very exclusive, club of a few hundred people who can go to those auctions and drop $100 million. And so it just, again, any kind of furniture, you name the category, people can come up with 1 or 2 names. But in the art world, there isn't one that exists. And so what we love to do is over-deliver on quality, provide a really great value, great stories behind everything we do, very consistent, quick delivery, great customer service, and be, we don't want to be Sotheby's, but we want to be like I think a mass market luxury brand that people, when they're designing, a new house or moving into a new apartment, just as they're filling their closets and they say, I'm going to go get something from Ralph Lauren, we'd love them to say, I'm going to get some Twyla pieces to put on the wall. And so that would be, for this to get to sort of an IPO-able event, the business becomes a luxury brand. And you either build those businesses by throwing so much advertising cash at it. Like if we had $200 million, we could probably create a brand overnight by putting it in every magazine in the world, but that's not how this company's being built. Or you build it kind of one customer at a time by just doing a really good job. And that's sort of where we are today. We just feel like if we can just keep over-delivering, and a friend tells a friend, and a friend tells a friend, that ultimately, the word gets out that this is the place to go if you're going to put, it's quality art that's affordable on your walls.
I love it. And you create that tipping point where, all of a sudden 3 of my friends have a Twyla piece, and I'm like, why don't I have one?
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about it. Hey, this has been a blast. Before I let you go, can we do a quick rapid fire?
Sure.
All right, here we go. What's the last book you read?
Moonwalking with Einstein.
Oh, I actually just finished that. Art will be as popular as music in year?
It will never be.
So I hear that you're an amateur artist. What was the title of the last piece you created?
I don't really title my stuff, but I guess that the last one that I'm proudest of was one that I did for the boardroom at the HomeAway World headquarters, and it was, if it had a name, I guess it would be called My White Picket Fence. But it was a big white picket fence that I built out of both wood and metal. But most of the posts in the picket fence were actually all the racing skis from my childhood. I grew up in New England and raced quite a bit, and I'm still a pretty avid skier. And so my white picket fence sort of combine that notion of being on the slopes and being in the mountains with, with a fence from a house.
Oh, that's great. Love it. All right, last one. What's your life motto?
I don't have a life. Well, I do have a life motto. Wake up with a grateful heart.
Beautiful. All right, sir. It's been a pleasure to have you. Tell us where can the audience find you or Twyla?
Just come see us at www.twyla.com. It's all there.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Well, folks, that's the end of today's episode. Be sure to check out Twyla at twyla.com or on Instagram at Twyla. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review it. Oh yeah, and don't forget to check us out at State of the Art on Twitter for behind-the-scenes photos, a sneak peek to next week's episode, and really cool art videos you're going to want to show your friends.